an act of last resort. In this context, we need to consider the likely costs and benefits if force is used, most likely not by the United States, but by Israel, a country that perceives weapons of mass destruction in the hands of the current regime as an existential threat to its very existence. But have no doubt, if Israel used force, the United States would be blamed and would also be a target of retaliation. And the costs could be substantial. Iran has many avenues to strike back, through ballistic missiles or the use of terrorism worldwide, or through its proxies in Iraq and Afghanistan. It can also create economic and political disruptions and unrest. But there are limits to what Iran can do and what it is willing to risk if we were to escalate further in response to their actions. Moreover, the program would not likely be ended by the use of force, as we saw after the 1982 strike against the Osirak reactor in Iraq. Instead, the program would almost surely go further underground. But the use of force would likely buy time, 1 year, perhaps up to 3 years. The key question is whether and how that time could be used strategically to fundamentally change the political conditions in Iran. Some argue that if force is used, all Iranians will rally around the regime as a nationalistic impulse. Others challenge that conventional wisdom, noting that the limited use of force would not alter the deep animosity of many, if not most, Iranians toward that regime. I don't know the answer, so let me leave you with that question for you to answer. Allow me to make just 2 concluding thoughts. The first, very briefly, as I said at the outset, is the only sustainable solution to the Iranian nuclear threat is the emergence of a free and democratic Iran. And second, and this is more of a personal note, I was asked here today to talk to you about Iran's nuclear program, and I hope my remarks have been informative. But I want to say that over the past few days, as I prepared my comments, and today as I have listened to the other speakers, I have learned a great deal about the MEK, which I had known before only as a source, perhaps the best source of information on Iran's nuclear program. And I can now say unequivocally that I am not only a supporter of delisting, but also of the other steps that Governor Ridge and others on the panel have put forth. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ambassador Joseph. We're very grateful to you and your leadership, and not only for our country, but for all the world, as these nuclear weapons pose a threat to all humanity. And it's so, we're also grateful for your service, and also today to make such a transparent outline. Doesn't it sound familiar? All of these obfuscations and denials by the Iranian regime on weapons of mass destruction, doesn't it sound familiar? Violating international law over and over again with respect to weapons of mass destruction, and at the same time violating international law with respect to human rights. This is not a good group that's running Iran. They threaten international security with weapons of mass destruction and the creation of a nuclear bomb. At the same time, they threat our very principles and human rights with their attacks against innocent, unarmed people. You said it over and over again, that we do not need more of the same policies of acquiescence and appeasement. That is what's gotten us this far with very few results from the Iranian regime, whether it's their suspension of pursuing weapons of mass destruction, or it's their suspension of their attacks on their own people or the people of Camp Ashraf. This is a pattern. We've seen it over and over again, as Alan Dershowitz said. So perhaps now it is a good segue to introduce an individual who spent his career uncovering patterns of corruption and immorality. Not only has Richard Benveniste been on the commission to investigate one of the greatest crimes against the United States, the 9/11 attacks, but he distinguished himself as the lead prosecutor on the Watergate Task Force investigating corruption at the highest levels of government in our own country. And he has been tasked with the job of investigating the historic record in World War II towards Germany and Japan and war crimes of that era. So this is a gentleman who has seen patterns of behavior, whether it was the Holocaust or whether it was Japan and the imperialist regime, or whether it was corruption here in our own country through Watergate, or whether it was the 9/11 Commission. We have someone who can speak to patterns of behavior of those who are corrupt throughout not only American history, but